So I was here on Friday, and I was wandering around, and my father and I, if you notice, we fixed a flagpole outside. We put a new flag on, and that was always very entertaining, to try and handle the mast and all that stuff. It was pretty cool. Anyway, it's a new flag. Check it out on the way out. But anyway, as I was walking back, there was, a bunch of kids playing in the playground. And this one little fella, I said, "Hey, how are you?" He said, "Hi." And that was it. That was the extent of the conversation. And look, I understand I'm larger than the average bear, a little intimidating. A little guy about this big. And he says, "Can I tell you something?" And I'm like, "Sure." And he goes, "The balls." And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "They don't have air, So I said to the teachers, and I'm bringing this up because I think all of you should do something about this. Our children are playing in our playground, future NBA basketball players without officially pressurized basketballs. And this little guy came up and wanted me to know that this was all Miss Donna's fault, and that if she would only allow the balls to be blown up, he would be able to practice for his future career. And this kid was so cute, and he said, "Not just one, there's multiples." So I didn't know, he didn't say multiples, he said there's others, that's what he said. There's not one, others. And I was like, "Oh, I'm really sorry." So I said to the teachers, the balls don't have any air in it, and they were like, "It's okay. It's okay. It's okay." So I'm just saying, I think we should start some sort of a campaign to make sure that our basketballs are of regulation. Right. However, the point to all this, besides the cute little kid who was really very cute, as they were going into the building, the kids are dispersed all over the playground. Who's up in the upper part of the one slide. Who's hiding in the house in the back corner, who's playing on the swings. And you could see the teachers, you hear them say, "Okay, time to go in." And you could see those who were quicker to turn and start moving toward the teacher. And then you realized over a period of time as I was standing there were a few who were not inclined to go inside. And so those people, those little folks, got called out by name. And when they were called by name, they immediately looked in that direction, and the teacher would be like, and the little one, would slide down. He would, "One more time," and she's like, yeah, "One more time, come on." And then they would come down. But ultimately, the ones who heard the voice of the teacher knew that this was their teacher and that they had to respond. And the ones that did not immediately respond, the teachers knew their names. There's a connection, there's an intimacy between the teachers and the students respond to that. I know you're going to say to me, "Please don't tell me sheep are like that," but honestly, if you've been to Jerusalem and if you've seen any of the shepherds as we have when we were there, you'll see that, the point of a corral, or most of the time they used a cave. They used a cave, and not just one flock would be inside the cave. There would be a couple of different flocks, and then at the entranceway, the shepherds lay their bodies. They're there because the sheep won't pass or walk over them, and so they're protected. They're protected. The sheep on the inside are protected, and the role of the shepherd is to make sure that nothing gets in at night. And then in the morning, when they come out, all they have to do is speak their voice, and their sheep, out of the 2 or 3 groups of sheep, know the voice of the shepherd, and they split and break themselves away from the others to go and walk with their shepherd. And then the other shepherd would do the same, and then finally the last shepherd. Jesus is talking to an audience that understands this. This is what they know. This is part of their lifestyle. This is common to them. This is not extraordinary. I have to sit there and explain it to us because not too many of us in this room own sheep. And so because we don't, we need to understand the point. But the greater the point here, there are really multiples, but one is the intimacy between the sheep and the shepherd. The shepherd has absolute trust of the sheep, and the sheep follow him because they know that he is the one who will take care of them. And ultimately, the shepherds are the one that lead the sheep into pastures where they could graze. So the sheep can't decide where to go on their own. So it's the shepherd who leads them to places where they can eat heartily from the grass and foliage of the land, but also where they can drink as well. So the sheep have become very comfortable knowing that this guy, his voice, is the voice that takes us to those great places we like to eat and those places where we get to drink, and we're always safe with him, and so we follow him. Jesus is talking to an audience that understands that, and the issue here, which I think is one that is lost on us because we don't fully comprehend, is when Jesus starts laying it out for the Pharisees who are there. We use this word all the time, I am this, I am that, right? We talk about, I'm hungry, right? I am hungry. But when Jesus says, I am the gate of the sheep, that I am is the voice coming out of the burning bush to Moses. The word usage is identical. So he is standing there before the Pharisees, and he is saying, I am. And the I am is indicative of Yahweh in the burning bush, who brings his people out of slavery. And then, as if it wasn't enough, he goes on to say, I am again. Now, if you're a studied Jew and a leader of the people, Yahweh's not even a word that they can say. Most of the time, it's substituted with Lord. The I am statement is never spoken of, ever. Now, it's not spoken in their prayer. It's not spoken in their services. It's not spoken within the temple. People, every single, even now, our Jewish brothers and sisters, do not pronounce the words that identify Yahweh as God, and that is the I am statement. And here, Jesus does it twice. So, as much as, and so you have to sort of, you have an audience that never hears this being said, and then you have a bunch of Pharisees who would teach that you never use that word, and here is Jesus saying, I am. I am the same person that appeared to Moses, and as the people were led out of Egypt, I too will lead my people out. And I am the gate, meaning that God alone determines who comes and who doesn't, not people, not institutions. He makes these declaratory statements, and I assure you, right after that, the Pharisees were looking for a way of getting rid of him because he is blasphemous. In their mind, forget about what it is he's trying to tell them. It's how he is declaring himself that crosses the line. And that is why when Jesus is before Caiaphas, and Caiaphas says, tell me this, are you the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of God? And Jesus says, I am. Those I am statements in the Gospels, we have to pick up every time Jesus says that. It's not like how we use those words. Those words declare an entity, a sovereign, a eternal being, the Father. And Jesus uses it in direct connection with who he is. And that is radical. But I think it's important for us to look at that, because then what is it exactly and who is it exactly that we are in relationship with? So the people, the audience, when Jesus says, I am, they all gasped, I assure you. And a lot of them from that moment on thought he was a blasphemer and thought that they couldn't follow him because he was so radical compared to what the institutions were teaching of the time. But for us, we use these words and we bounce in and out of this so much, we don't even understand the reverence or the power of the statement. And so because of that, moments like this where we're being taught by the gospel allows us to realize that the one we are in relationship with is the one who has created everything that is, including these instruments that God has given us. This is the ultimate, all-powerful authority. The thing that gets me even further, and this is one that, I struggle with because it's such a profound statement. So he says all this. He says basically that the Pharisees are stealing people from God, right? He says everyone else who jumps in from another way is a thief and a robber. And then he goes on to basically say, you're the ones. He's talking to the Pharisees. He's talking to the established religion of the time, and he's saying, because of what you are placing upon my people, they're not able to encounter God. They're not able to come face to face with the Father. What you have done is you've put up blockades, and so you are a thief and a robber stealing sheep out of my Father's fold. That's a pretty powerful statement all by itself. The next one, though, for us, and by the way, we can maybe say and ask ourselves whether or not institutions in our day do the very same thing. Do we put up a lot of walls and blockades so people don't encounter Jesus, that we don't invite people to have an experience of Jesus first, that it's more about laws and regulations and rules and all that? There's an argument to be made whether or not in some instances we go too far, and perhaps we too are blocking sheep from encountering God. I'm hoping this church does not do that, but it is a possibility, and in a lot of places, I'm sure it is very and most likely happening. This is a statement that I whenever I read this is a sentence that stops me in my tracks, and it asks me, what is it exactly that Jesus is talking about? Jesus says, Jesus has come so that they, sheep, might have life and have it more abundantly. I came so that they, us, the sheep, might have life and have it more abundantly. And the question that I still haven't answered for myself is, it's easy to say what the life is, eternal life, everlasting life. But this abundant life seems to imply our existence here and now, not something later, not something that we're meant to get to. It's meant to be a lived reality now among us, that we should somehow, because we are followers of Jesus, we should stand out from society because we are experiencing a life that is more abundant than those who have not had a personal encounter with the shepherd. And so the question I have is, what is that? And maybe that's our homework for this week. What does it mean when Jesus says that you have life? Which I get that. We have a relationship with Jesus, which predecessors and other religions don't have. We have an intimacy with our God that other traditions simply do not have. We have the promise of everlasting life because of the cross. We have an empty tomb which, by the way, this week I really got stuck on, and every single day it kept coming up. I don't understand why we don't have an empty tomb hanging around our necks instead of the cross. So just funny, we were at a jewelry section the other day, a couple weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, and you know I'm slow, so it sits there and it just festers. And it was the Last Supper on a chain, on a cross. And you couldn't really see the people, but each person was a different stone, you know. And if you got up real close, you got the idea that it was the 12 apostles around it. But it was the first time I ever saw the 12 disciples at the Last Supper as a amulet or a coin or a pendant. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, the one thing that distinguishes us, and this is because we went to a Roman Catholic First Communion yesterday, in their churches, every single one of their crosses has a corpse. Every single one. Doesn't matter. The one that they walk in on, you know, when they process in, they carry the cross. Every single cross, no matter where it is in the church, no matter where, every single one has a corpus on it. And we don't. And the reason Martin Luther was teaching about that was it doesn't end with the cross. It doesn't end with the crucifixion. There's this next step called the resurrection. God bless you. And that resurrection is probably what he's talking about, living life more abundantly. But I have to tell you, even our theology as Protestants still focuses on what was accomplished by the cross. And yes, we mention about the fact, oh, and by the way, yes, we get to go to heaven when this is all said and done. But it doesn't seem to me, and if you read it in the Greek, it's not written as though this fullness is something that happens after this. And I'm wondering whether or not we need to start looking at our faith tradition not simply from the cross's perspective, but from the empty tomb's perspective. What does the empty tomb really mean for us? What meaning and purpose does it point out for us? What does it mean that we are redeemed? What does it mean that we are promised everlasting life? Do we actually live abundantly? Or somewhere along the way are we stuck? And this goes back to Jesus' comments against the Pharisees, and I found myself this week reflecting upon this, was saying, well, you know, maybe we too, maybe we have been and are being a bit robbed. Maybe there's something more that we're meant to be experiencing and having in this relationship with the resurrected Lord, who's a shepherd which, by the way, as sheep we're following. And by the way, I preached about this before. I hate being considered a sheep. I am not a sheep. I'm not, okay? But we'll leave that for another time, another place. But if we are following this Jesus, okay, what is this abundance that we're supposed to be experiencing now? And is it possible, because our theology has gotten stuck on the cross and redemption and salvation, that we've forgotten and we haven't gotten to the point, maybe as a Christian church, where we haven't taken that and we haven't transferred it and we haven't integrated it into our everyday life? Because what Jesus is talking about here is a life experience that brings us a sense of fulfillment and accomplishment and absoluteness, that we should be standing out because of what it is that we believe. And yet at the same time, I think we don't see our lives, or we don't experience our spiritual lives as being abundant. That word abundant, I can't get out of my head. He could have used any other word. But he says we're meant to live life and live it abundantly. And only because of his presence can that take place. And so might come across a little off the rails, but I'm wondering whether or not we haven't accomplished and finished truly understanding what the resurrection of Jesus really means for us now. I don't want a God who promises us something later on. Don't get me wrong. I'll take a nice room with a suite, looking over, I will. But ultimately speaking, I don't want to live just for something else, that we behave a certain way now when we get that. It doesn't make, it's not rational based on what Jesus declares and talks about. And I think maybe for us as Christians, we haven't really pushed the theology far enough. And I had this same sense when I was doing a scripture study. Indeed, John LaSasso, who was pastor of Immaculate Conception in the Bronx when I was a friar and stationed there, we did the Stations of the Cross, right? You remember. So we did the Stations of the Cross, and I don't know, 150 casting crew. It was enormous. Anyway, it was beautiful. It really was. It was a powerful, prayerful, reflective experience. It was outrageous. But John and I got into a fight because John told me I could not do the resurrection. I could only go up into his death and putting him into the tomb. And John said to me that you could not celebrate the resurrection of Christ coming out. And I told John, fine, I'm not doing it. And he says, you're really going to be like that? Yes, because even then, in my studies, there was something about that resurrection that mattered. And it's not just about life everlasting. Life, abundant life now, and that's what I was sort of saying to John. It's only part of the story. Putting him in this tomb and just leaving it like that it's not complete. So you have to bring him out. Plus, I had smoke machines and lights, and I had all these little angels. We had all this stuff going on. It was great. I have the video. We'll have to show it one day. But anyway, but it was a powerful ending to what was a horrid experience. That type of abundance, that Jesus resurrecting from the dead, that power, that authority, somehow has been placed on us, but I don't think we have dared even touch what the depth of that really means for us as human beings. What does Jesus' presence on earth, what does his resurrection mean now for you and I? Life abundant. Maybe it's something we could reflect on this week.